Bizarre Reality Media.
Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on. They're not dogs. They're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. Are you guys going to want to come film this?
Put them out.
I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said, "There's a monster on the wall."
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
Welcome back, Bizarrites, to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that some refer to as Shayn Squatch, aka as Shayn, the original Shayn Squatch. And alongside me, as usual, I have the man who never messes up his name, the original. Well, not the original. Actually, he is the original. He is the original Big Bad Boo Daddy, Sir Orin Felix. Welcome to the show.
Hey, I might not mess up my name, but I mess up plenty of other stuff, so that's okay.
Well, I mess up my own name coming in almost every single time. I usually don't mess up your name, but I got caught up on myself on that one, so I fumbled on your name. I'll give myself that one. I at least fumbled on that one.
Yeah, are you the original Shayn Squatch? Are you the Shayn? I mean, what's going on here? I've got to know.
I am the Shayn, a.k.a. some kind of Shayn Squatch. Maybe not the original, but I am some kind of a Shayn Squatch.
Okay. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Well, now that has officially been cleared up on who's the original Shayn Squatch and who is the Big Bad Boo Daddy, now we, of course, have to give them some news and updates. So we ain't got too much going on for today, but what's our news and update, Orin?
Yeah, like Shayn said, not a whole lot of housekeeping and news and updates for today's episode, but our next episode of Bizarre Inquiries, which is our YouTube live show, will be Thursday, February the 5th. It's going to be roughly 7:15 Eastern time on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. So you guys, as always, be sure to submit questions or videos or articles or anything like that that you want us to inquire about. And also be sure to join us in the chat during the episode.
And also, I just wanted to throw this one in there because we've been a little bit scattered on our schedule lately. Nothing going on behind the scenes with the show or anything like that. We had the holidays fall in, and then we ended up having a couple things fall through with guests and everything. So if anybody's been worried about the show going anywhere the past 2 months because we've been kind of scattered, there's nothing going on. Everything should be back to normal. So I just want to throw that one in there for the sake of, I know there's a lot of listeners who have been asking about, what's been going on. So also everything will remain constant now. So I should have threw that in a little bit earlier, but continuing on, for all of the people that do like to contact me, some of the best ways that you guys can contact us if you guys are interested in being a guest on the show, sharing your experiences or encounters, or again, for any other reason whatsoever, you guys can contact us through our email, which is bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys could also hit us up through our production email, which is bizarrerealitymedia@outlook.com. Or you guys could always call or text the Bizarre Reality Media hotline, and you guys can do that 24/7. The line is always open, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys happen to miss that, it is available down in the show description.
All right, y'all, let's get into tonight's episode.
Please welcome to the show, author and UFO researcher Preston Dennett. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Shayn's told me a lot about you. I've read your bio a little bit, so I'm super excited to pick your brain a little bit and talk about some of your research.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been at it for a long time.
So with that in mind, Preston, would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got started and a little bit about your writing, maybe?
Yeah, I got dragged into this field involuntarily, kind of kicking and screaming the whole way. I did not believe in UFOs growing up. I thought it was all nonsense. I thought people who saw UFOs were hoaxing, hallucinating, misperceiving, or mentally ill. which of course is what our government wants people to believe for a very long time at least. And I bought into it. And God, how wrong I was. It all really came tumbling down for me on November 17, 1986. I remember it. I'll never forget it because the evening news came on, and there was, I think it was Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw, a big news guy, saying that this guy over Alaska, a pilot, Captain Kenju Torochi, it's now a real famous case over Alaska. This pilot saw a UFO while flying JAL Airlines, a Japanese commercial airliner, and it followed their plane, tracked it for about, I don't know exactly how many miles. It was almost an hour. They requested a course change, and it was on radar. It was a big deal. Of course, I didn't know any of that from the news report, which was just pretty much trying to debunk the sighting and laughing at the pilot. Really, it was not a serious news report. But it got me thinking because they did show the pilot his picture. I thought, that poor guy, he's deluded. What an idiot. He's going to lose his job over this. Why would he ever report something like that? Because no, UFOs aren't real. The stars are too far away. They look just like people on Star Trek. This possibly can't be real. This can't be real. But it got me thinking for some reason, and I'm really not exactly sure why. But it reminded me that my older brother, Mark, I have 3 older brothers and an older sister and a younger sister. We're a big family. I didn't think any of them believed in UFOs. But my older brother, Mark, had come running into the house when I was about 13 years old. That was maybe, 7 years earlier or so. And he's like, I saw a UFO. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And didn't really listen to him. All I really remember him saying is it was about the height of a telephone pole. So years go by and I hear this news report and I approach Mark. I'm like, Mark, tell me about that UFO you, quote, think you saw. And he's like, I did see it. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, fine, tell me. Now, this is a guy I love and trust, right? I know he's not going to lie to me. And he describes this really intense, very close-up sighting of a metallic disc, maybe 50 or 100 feet away, again, treetop level, and chased it in his car down Reseda Boulevard. That's in Southern California, outside of LA where we were. And it was an amazing sighting. I mean, a metallic disc, colored lights, no sound, and chased it for about 15 minutes until it darted off. It was funny. He said it would wait for him, drive up to it, and then it would dart forward. And they were passing other cars chasing it. So he's like, if you don't believe me, go ahead and ask Phil and Greg. Those were my friends. They were with me. You know them. Which, of course, I did. So I did. I called them up, and they confirmed it and added new details. That's what sent the ball rolling. So I started looking into it a little bit more deeply and found out that I had some good friends who had sightings, really good sightings, of a egg-shaped object floating over the house, or another friend who saw a triangle of light that came swooping down towards them. They had missing time. It took me a while to realize that that's what he was talking about. And I started buying books on the subject. Stupid me, brought it up at work and found out that the lady whose desk was next to mine had a major encounter. Her whole family saw this object darting across the sky. I'm like, that was a helicopter. What are you talking about? She's like, no. You're not listening to me. It went from one side of the horizon to the other in about a second, and then darted around. It turned at right angles. Her daughter was visited by Greys in her bedroom and taken on board. Fully consciously remembered it. And in walks Dorothy, who I worked with. And she's like, oh, UFOs. One followed me home from the library and blah, blah, blah. She had missing time. I'm like, oh, my God. So I bought every book I could find. I'm going to prove it's swamp gas, which, of course, I couldn't. And it kind of just rolled out from there. I joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, became a field investigator. That was all within a year or so. And started really researching. If you saw a light in the sky, I'm coming over to your house. I really wanted to figure out what was going on here. And I started writing articles for magazines. getting paid, by the way. I couldn't believe it. $100. Like, wow, this is actually kind of cool. And wrote about 30 articles over the next 10 years or so. Started going on the radio, speaking at conventions, going to conventions. And 10 years in, 1996, I wrote my first book, UFO Healings, and didn't look back. After that, I'm hooked. Once you're in, you're kind of hooked. There's no way out.
Absolutely.
But yeah, now 30 some books, 32 and counting, and still going strong. Yep.
Well, that's a pretty remarkable story. I think it's kind of interesting. It almost seems like all these people were put in your path almost to kind of spark this interest and make you go down the path of researching and writing. So I think that's kind of one of those, kind of odd serendipitous situations or synchronicities that people talk about a lot with this sort of thing.
Yeah, I had a lot of those, by the way. I mean, there was a wave of sightings right over my hometown. What are the chances? I mean, it's crazy.
So one question I did want to ask you, Preston, in reading through your bio and some of the books that you've written, I noticed that you wrote a book about like schoolyard UFO encounters and sightings. And that's a topic that's always really fascinated me, and kind of the similarities between a lot of these sightings and encounters. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your research in that arena?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's one that really, I don't know, it just affected me really profoundly. I actually cried when I'm writing this book. I'm not kidding. Because these are little kids. We all love our little kids. I'd had a few cases. I mean, my sister-in-law saw a gray right in front of Stagg Street Elementary School, given it was at night. But it was right in front of the school, which was kind of odd. Weird place to see a gray. This is in Van Nuys. And had another guy I interviewed who said he had a missing time while on the recess at a Hawthorne school in Southern California. Didn't think much about it. Of course, time goes on. In 1996, I think it was, the Ariel Elementary School in Rua, Zimbabwe starts getting publicized. Mm-hmm. I thought, wow, that's an amazing case, which, in a nutshell is 200 kids on the playground, UFO lands, ETs come out, communicate with a few of them, talking about, the dangers of technology and don't chop down the forests and you're polluting the air and so forth. And, I thought, gosh, wasn't there another case? And I'm thinking, because I know this subject really well, right? I mean, if you can see the books behind me, I've got 1,000. Not kidding. There's more around the corner. And I thought, yes, I remember the Melbourne case in Westall High School, 1966, March. Let me see. No, it was April 1966. UFO lands next to the school. Some 200-300 students and teachers see it. I thought, wait a second, there's another one. Opelika, Florida, Crestview Elementary School. It was 1 year to the day after the Melbourne Westall High School case. I thought, gosh, there's another one I know of. And I'm racking my brain, and I looked it up. It was Broadhaven in Wales, 1977. UFO lands next to the school. Little ETs come out. You can still see the kids' drawings of this. And so I started digging a little deeper because I remembered another one. The Hillsdale, Michigan sighting, Hillsdale College. Almost 100 students, teachers, police saw it. It hung out there for 2 hours, a UFO. And actually landed next to the school. A lot of people don't know that, but it landed. So I thought, gosh, there's another one, and these UFOs are landing. This is crazy. And I started looking in books and didn't really find many. But I had a sneaking suspicion that there was more to this. And I started looking at the UFO news clipping service, which I subscribe to and have, I don't know, years and decades of news clippings. And I hit pay dirt with that. I struck gold, and it was amazing. And I started looking into databases like the NUFORC, National UFO Reporting Center, and MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and others, QFOS, APRO, there's a bunch of them, NICAP. And I collected, took me a year or so, over 100 cases. Tracked several of them myself. So cool. These are, there's nothing like it in the literature. Because I looked up sporting events, and I found a few cases, or concerts. I found a few, not 100. in these cases, it's so unusual. These are daylight encounters, for one thing. Mm-hmm. They come very low level sightings. So we're talking maybe 100, 200, 500 feet, 1,000 up the outer end, but low level. And in 1/3 of the cases, they land next to the school, or humanoids I've seen, or humanoids. Half the cases involve elementary schools, primary schools, our youngest kids, who've never even heard of UFOs. No, they don't have fear. They're not overlaying their own beliefs on this. So they're, in my opinion, really good witnesses. Mm-hmm. So this, I started hearing testimony from some of these young kids, and that's what really kind of touched me. I'm like, oh my God, because none of them have ever recanted. None of them have ever been caught in a hoax. There are cases involving landing traces, photographs, physiological effects, the whole thing. And so many. I documented 100 cases in my book on this subject, but since then I've found probably another 100. I'm going to have to do a reissue. But so interesting, and I think I kind of figured out why they're doing it, actually.
So I'd love to be able to get into some of the whys, because I've kind of noticed, at least, that it seems like with a lot of the interactions with extraterrestrials and kids versus extraterrestrials and adults, it seems to be more of these like interactive experiences versus like abduction experiences, so to speak. Like, I know that there is, of course, some mix in between, but generally speaking, it seems like when they interact with kids, it's a lot more they're coming to have some type of a conversation about something. But yes, I would love to get into some of the whys.
Yeah, I think they would with adults too, but by then we're trained to fear. Mm-hmm. And, we absolutely lose our minds. Kids, not so much. Mm-hmm. Just because someone looks a little different doesn't really bother them, it seems. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I started looking at all these cases. I'm like, what is going on here? And looking at the Hillsdale College incident in Michigan, that one kind of started to really provide some answers, because Jim and Coral Lorenzen, my heroes, they started APRA. They were early pioneers in this field, pointed to that case in particular and said, you know what? We got quite a few schoolyard encounters. Mm-hmm. We think that the ETs are kind of preparing people for maybe open official contact. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting thing to say, which of course hasn't really happened. But Raymond Fowler, you may have heard his name. He investigated the Betty Andreasson case and did the Allagash 5 in Maine. Okay. Really another famous case. Just a great researcher, one of my favorite out there, very objective, very passionate, very thorough. He said, when he heard about the Hillsdale case, he said, I have 16 cases so far this year. This is March of 1966. So he's got 16 cases. He says 8 of them, half, have taken place over schools. So I'm like, wow, this is absolutely intentional. And Jim and Coral Lorenzen said, this is going to happen again. We have so many, it's going to happen again. Of course, it was 2 weeks later that the Melbourne case took place, the Westall High School. So after looking at all these cases and kind of unpacking them, and here I kind of move into the realm of speculation, which I hate to do, but you can't help it, especially in this field. Mm-hmm. I think, honestly, that this is part of a vigorous and very well orchestrated, carefully orchestrated publicity campaign on the part of the ETs. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I started mapping them and kind of looking at the timing of this. Like the Melbourne case was 1 year to the day before the Opalaka case. Like, well, that's kind of synchronistic. Mm-hmm. There was a case at Beverly High School that Raymond Fowler investigated. That I think that was also in the 1960s. These UFOs hovered over the high school, went up and went straight to what was it? Not Berwick College, the nearby college, about 10 miles away, and put on a show for the college students. So I kind of looked at him like, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a musician who goes from city to city to city playing their music, mm-hmm. or a book tour for an author. So that's what I think they're doing, honestly. It's a very clever way to introduce themselves to all humanity in a way that slides under the radar a little bit. Because, kids, nobody pays attention to kids. Go away, you bother me, type of thing. But they are now adults, of course. And this, I think, has led to a really widespread, not only belief, but firsthand knowledge of the extraterrestrial presence on our planet.
We apologize, guys, for the interference, but we will be right back. And now back to the show.
So kind of following up on that, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up question, probably, a year and a half, 2 years ago at this point, I did a deep dive episode on the Flatwoods monster encounter. And, when I went into that, I knew just, kind of the broad strokes of the story that everybody knows. But digging into it, I was kind of amazed how many, at least on the surface, similarities that story seems to have with these schoolyard encounters. When the young boys who eventually saw the monster, saw the craft or ball of light or whatever you want to call it coming down from the sky, they were playing football in the local schoolyard. Granted, it was, in the evening, they weren't at school. But also the connections between the children, drawing very similar drawings of the creature like is reported in the different schoolyard encounters. But it was kind of funny to me because I had never heard the Flatwoods encounter kind of lumped in with these schoolyard encounters. Do you think there's any sort of correlation and connection between the Flatwoods encounter and these other schoolyard encounters, or is it kind of just its own thing?
I never really thought of that. I didn't realize they were out there playing football. I certainly know the case. I wouldn't. I'm not inclined to go there because these schoolyard cases are very specific.
Right.
They're almost always when they're at recess, which is amazing coincidence in and of itself. Usually a daylight sighting. All but like 3 of them are daylight sightings.
Okay.
But what I do, one correlation I think is kids. Because I've interviewed a lot of people, and a good number of them were kids when they saw their UFO or had their encounter. I'm like, why are so many kids seeing UFOs? Well, they're outside. And I think that's really the main reason. Because if you look at who's seeing UFOs, you get a lot of night watchmen, you get a lot of truck drivers, people on a lonely highway late at night, people whose job puts them outside for some reason. And kids, they're almost outside playing all day. So I think
especially back in years past.
Right? I know I was. I never saw anything. But yeah, I think that could be a connection there. That's a great case. I talked to Frank Ficino. If you get a chance to interview him, you should. He's a great guy. He wrote the go-to book on that. Really good book.
As I got researching that case, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I think it's probably my favorite, alien UFO, high strangeness, whatever you want to call it, case at this point. So,
yeah, it's an amazing one. It's amazing how many there are. I was thinking about that, because I'm like, people are like, oh, I'm skeptical. I'm like, how can you be skeptical? I started doing this series on my YouTube channel called UFOs in Your Hometown. Name any town, name any city. I dare you, and I will find a case there. I got 1,000 responses, so I'm working my way down this list. And I'm finding UFO encounters in every darn single town. Little tiny bodunk towns you've never heard of. People are trying to stump me. This guy's like, he named this town in like the Yukon with like 10 people in it. I found one. Like, no, you're not going to stump me on this. Go ahead and try. My point is, there's, if you look at MUFON and NUFORC, their databases together have about 200,000 to 300,000 cases. That's in the U.S. alone, just 2 databases, not including NICAP and APRO and the others. So there's probably 1 million documented cases in the U.S. alone. Wow. So we're looking at, 20, 30 million documented cases in terms of being reported in newspapers and UFO data reporting centers. Just to cap that up real quick, I always ask people when I interview them, did you report this to anybody? Did you report it to MUFON? And always the answer is, what's MUFON? No, are you kidding? I didn't tell anybody. I haven't even told my wife this. Like, oh my God. So you could times it by 100 of what we're actually seeing. This is how common these encounters are.
Just to bring it back to the school experiences for a minute, I don't know if you've been able to follow this trail at all, but have you noticed any like signs of like continued contact after any of these school experiences where, maybe somebody has like lifetime contact?
Little bit. It's not super common. I suspect it's more common than I've been able to track. But yeah, there's a few cases. Certainly one guy had a close-up sighting on the recess yard. All the kids were there. It followed him home. That night they came into his room and said, "You need to come with us." He absolutely freaked out. He ended up taking money out of his parents' bank account, leaving a note, because they didn't believe him. He told him, they're coming to get me. And they're like, "Oh, honey, you're fine. You're dreaming. It's imagination." He took money out of their account, wrote a note. "No, they're coming to get me. I've got to go." They found him at Atlanta Airport. The police did, like a day later or something. Because, he absolutely had contact following his schoolyard sighting. Another lady at the Rua, Zimbabwe case, Emily Trim, God bless her, she passed away, became a contactee following that encounter. She was one of, at least 60 students, closer to 100, who saw the UFO, but she talked to the ETs directly. She walked right up to them. They told her, "You need to tell people that there's a good way to use technology and a bad way, and you could do better." Yeah, she became a contactee. So there's a few cases. I suspect there was more, but no, it's mostly just close encounters of the first kind. Simple sightings.
Have you noticed with any of these people that have had these continued experiences that there seems to be any like continuation between other people that have experienced the phenomenon? Because it seems like a lot of the time you have these messages that they come and they end up telling people, and there's kind of like a little mixed bag of these different messages. But have you noticed any like similarities that seem to be like a common trope that's told to almost every person that you've come in contact with that's had an experience?
Oh, yeah, I sure have. And I hear it over and over again. I'm just going to throw this out there because my favorite contactee is one I wrote a book about. I wrote this book called Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure with Dolly Safran, great witness, Department of Defense employee, a nurse, lifeguard, zookeeper, just a really good trained witness. And she was able to confirm these messages in real good detail. But I hear it over and over again. And it started from the beginning when people were pulled on board right up to the, very recent cases. I don't care if it's grays or human looking or tall whites or little blue beings or mantids or what have you. The message is always the same. When anyone ever gets contacted, almost always the first thing they'll say, or they'll kind of think to you, is don't be afraid. Have no fear, no harm will come to you, you're fine, relax, and that sort of thing. Because, of course, we go into straight panic. And they're taken on board and probably physically examined, maybe healed, often healed. And this is when a lot of people do have very strong fear reaction. But if you don't, they'll give you a tour of the craft, they'll show you, they'll open the window and show you Earth down below or the moon or a star field or something. They'll take you up to the control room, and they'll give you messages. And the messages fall into about 3, maybe 4 categories. One, and this is so consistent, is warnings against nuclear proliferation and the use of nuclear material in any capacity. They don't like it. They say this is the pathway to self-destruction. Second would be pollution and the destruction of the environment. What are you doing? You don't need to use these fossil fuels. This is crazy. You're polluting your planet. Third would be warnings against greed and corruption. That's very common. I just looked into another case. They said, corruption is the root of humanity's problem. The corruption in governments are going to lead to your downfall and social collapse. Those would be the 3 main areas, but there are others. They talk about who they are. People will ask them, who are you and where do you come from and this sort of thing. And they say, well, we are you. You are us. We are one. When Dolly Safran told me that exact phrase, I laughed out loud because I've heard that exact phrase over and over again from contactees. I'm like, oh my God, which just goes to show our relationship to them is a lot closer. because some of them look just like us. And in fact, I don't think we even evolved on this planet, according to the ETs, and I've heard this a number of times. We used to live on Mars. There's some research pointing towards that too. Another would be, kind of more, they'll talk about your own personal life, even guiding you in some way. They will also talk about psychic abilities and how important it is to, ramp those up in ourselves and pay attention and really learn to develop those. Those are the main messages over and over and over again. So yeah, very consistent.
Say this will probably kind of lead way into some of the stuff that I want to get into with you today, but something that we talk about all the time on the show is how similar these UFO experiences sound to angelic experiences, specifically even ones from the Bible, with the first instance being, don't be afraid, everything's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. And then right after that, they take them somewhere and they show them something, like specifically like the Book of Enoch. If you kind of look at it through this context, almost sounds exactly like these UFO experiences, which kind of maybe plays into some of these healing experiences that we talk about it all the time on the show, that we think that a lot of these different things that people are talking about are all the same thing, but people are just calling them different names and categorizing them differently through different periods in time. But I want to kind of dive into some of your research and experience diving into the similarities with this.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the similarities and commonalities are undeniable. And I think we know that our own belief systems, our cultural beliefs, play a strong role in how we perceive reality. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly interviewed people who were like devoutly religious and so sure that they had seen a demon. I'm like, well, just tell me what you saw. Don't tell me what you think you saw. Just tell me what you saw. And she's like, well, it was on my bed and had this huge head and skinny little body. I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere here. It was a gray, no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And I think there are some researchers who have this tendency to conflate all these things together. Like, oh, it's this intelligence and it's wearing different masks. Hold on there. I think that's a leap of faith. I don't think that that's what's going on at all. Because having looked into demonic encounters and angelic encounters and little people, fairies, gnomes, elves, that sort of thing, there's some similarities there, but I think some of these are absolutely little people. Probably better termed cryptoterrestrials, not ETs, because there's some marked differences between some of these accounts. And I think probably some angelic accounts are exactly what they appear to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe better termed an interdimensional being of some kind. I hesitate to say that they're all ET. Some, no doubt in my mind, are ET because it's just cut and dry or down the line, the way people are describing it. Mm-hmm. Even in Roman times, they would see things that they called flying shields, because that's what their cultural context was. They did not know what else to call it. And the idea of extraterrestrials from other planets, while it was kind of around for centuries, it wasn't popularized really at all until, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, they started to write science fiction. But it wasn't until the 40s until that idea became fixed into popular culture. Mm-hmm. I think we're onto something now. I think kind of figured it out that this is what we are dealing with, ETs. I don't think this is an intelligence that wears different masks by any means. It's Jacques Vallée puts forth that theory and other people. And I looked up his 5 reasons for why he thinks this is true. He's like, well, the ETs wouldn't look like us. Well, how do you know? Have you been to another planet? That's a complete assumption. Mm-hmm. And actually, what the ETs are telling people is we share a common heritage. We come from the same place. We share a common ancestry. Yes, they look like us. The humanoid form is the universal template. That's what these cases are showing us. And you can speculate all you want, but we're kind of stuck with the data. And I think following the data where it leads us is true science, not, wildly speculating. That's kind of my assessment of all this. The little people, though, yeah. I did a whole study on that, and gosh, was I shocked when people started telling me, oh, I'm so glad you did this because I saw an elf. I'm like, you're kidding me. I thought it was the 1800s. Nope. It's still happening today. Little people in all cultures, by the way, pretty much.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, in addition to you being a UFO researcher and an investigator for MUFON, I understand you're also a bit of a ghost hunter and paranormal investigator. What we like to talk about a lot on the show is the possible connections between different high strangeness type events or encounters, whether that be, aliens and cryptids or paranormal hauntings, what have you. So I was just curious your thoughts on if there is any connections between these different classes of encounters, whether that be aliens or little people or cryptids. And if so, what do you think some of those possible connections could be?
Yeah, this took me years to unpack because occasionally I get these weird cases, which were like one guy, a radiologist, a good witness, had a big, let me see, which came first? The UFO landed in his backyard in Canyon Country, pretty remote area. Next day, Bigfoot showed up. And followed that, he had this poltergeist outbreak. I'm like, what is going on here? I interviewed these ladies who had a terrible haunting. They had a UFO sighting right after it occurred. Real close-up major sighting. And talked to people, and they'd be taken on board and have all this weird activity going on. They're seeing shadow people. They become a medium. They start channeling. Just weird high strangeness stuff. And so I just kept collecting the cases and just kind of trying to figure it out. Yeah, there is a connection. I think that, this is my assessment, okay? Because there's still research that needs to be done on this, I think. But in terms of Bigfoot, let's start there. There's a bunch of cases, a couple of hundred, which is fairly significant. Really not when you consider there's probably 1 million Bigfoot encounters and millions of UFO encounters, and rarely do the two meet. But they do. In a couple of hundred, they intersect perfectly. And that kind of freaks me out. I'm like, what's going on here? Is Bigfoot an alien? That was kind of my first go-to. But after looking at these cases, because there are people who've seen a Bigfoot coming out of a UFO and going in or in the area when a UFO shows up. I'm like, gosh, this is crazy. Because it's, most Bigfoot cases don't have this. If the Bigfoot was an alien, UFOs would be there most of the time. They're not. Bigfoot goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands. I think, like Broen, when I think about what skeptics might think of this, I think Bigfoot is intelligent, Sasquatch. I think it's a sentient being with, there's a paranormal aspect to it for sure if you investigate Bigfoot, and I have. I think some Bigfoot are UFO contactees in the same way a person is. ETs are contacting all different people. They're certainly bringing animals on board. We've got many cases of that, plants too, soil samples. So yeah, I think that's the connection with Bigfoot. Now, as far as poltergeists, finally figured that out, I think, because I kept getting cases where people would come back and books would fly off the shelves. One lady, this is the case that kind of clinched it for me. She had an encounter experience, went to work, and blew out her computer. Called the IT guy, like, fix my computer. Went to the copier and blew that out. Took it offline. And she just calls the IT guy, like, hey, as soon as you're done with my computer, I broke the copier. Went to the fax machine and broke that. And he's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm not touching. I don't know. I think I figured it out because I just interviewed a lady who said, would blow out light bulbs. Contactees can't wear watches. They will speed up, they slow down, they break. Another guy I interviewed was a welder and went to work and blew out this very expensive welding machine over and over again, and he was the only one who would do it. They finally called, his bosses called him in and demanded he goes for a physical examination. They found a little implant in his body, but that's it. So what is going on here? I think that a contact experience, and this is true for near-death experiences as well, how would I put it? Escalates or enhances or strengthens your bioelectric field in some way that you start displaying these abilities. It advances your psychic abilities. Because remember, ETs communicate telepathically. That's how they do it. And people who have that communication suddenly start experiencing it. And I've got a number of cases where people come back from their contact experience, and yeah, things start flying around, and now they can do mediumship. Suddenly they start having astral projection. They have precognition. They channel. They can do all of these things that are, of course, natural human abilities that the ETs are trying so hard to wake us up to. And then I found a connection to levitation. Human levitation is a real thing. I ended up writing a whole book on it. It's in all cultures. It goes back thousands of years. It's been proven in a laboratory setting a half dozen times. Got to be more research into this because this is so cool. When I interviewed Dolly Saffron, I'm like, I don't suppose you've ever experienced levitation. Because as a matter of fact, I have. And my family even saw it happen. So I interviewed her family. She's a really good witness. She's got lots of evidence, photographic evidence and such. And corroborating witnesses and medical evidence and so forth. But yeah, we have the ability to levitate, and that happens also after a UFO encounter. So that's the connection. It's us doing it. We are the agent of this poltergeist-like activity that's going on. And yeah, all the paranormal stuff that happens, again, us doing it as a result of a contact experience, which wakes up that ability, which is one of the ET agendas.
All right, guys, we got to take another break. We'll be right back. And now we're getting back to the bazaar.
I could definitely see that in the aspect of poltergeist experiences, because they talk about how poltergeist experiences typically happen when there's an emotional teenager in the house. A lot of the time it ends up being like an emotional female teenager, but that would completely make sense if it's almost like a reflection of them having these abilities, but not necessarily realizing that they have these abilities. Because, I mean, even in a lot of different paranormal cases, it seems like everything up spikes as soon as there's some type of like emotional outburst or something in the house, which for anybody that dives into like telepathic abilities, that always seems to be when people tend to show them the most, is when they're under traumatic experiences or emotional experiences, and then they end up having these outbursts, which also, I guess, can follow into another question. Do you think that it's possible that some of the reason why these UFO experiences might be traumatic in the extent of people getting abducted might be for simply the sake of kickstarting and activating some of these abilities? It's, try to traumatize them to the point where maybe it'll start to kick in, and maybe that's why they kind of stick to these specific bloodlines where it seems like, they might have a little bit better of luck waking these things up?
I'm not sure I would put it exactly that way, but I think sometimes, and I would point to Whitley Strieber with this, they will give you an encounter that is so undeniable that you can't deny it anymore, because we are so good at that. We're so good at being afraid. We're so good at compartmentalizing, so good at denying and explaining away and ignoring and, just not waking up. So sometimes I think they will do something not to intentionally scare a person or traumatize them, though that is in effect what happens. It's a rare contactee that hasn't gone through, the trauma and the PTSD and the nightmares and the insomnia and all of this. Usually they'll get through it. That's the pattern I see over and over again. Oh, it was very scary, a mixed bag in the beginning, but ultimately they're glad they had this experience. They were healed. They were psychically awakened. But yeah, I think that absolutely does happen, because that is their goal. Just a quick aside, I don't use the word abduction anymore or abducted. I call them onboard UFO encounters, because I kept getting in trouble with some of these people I was interviewed. It's like, please don't call me an abductee. That's not how I look at it. Some do, there's a whole bell curve there. Mm-hmm. But most of the people I've talked to, and it's hundreds, I would say 80 to 90% feel like this was ultimately good for them, a benevolent experience. The ETs aren't trying to hurt, harm, scare, or take over or anything like that. On the contrary, they are here to, and you can see this in the onboard experience. There's a very prominent pattern of what I would call healing, guiding, teaching, informing, warning, waking people up. Mm-hmm. Basically, that is why they're here. Because they came en masse in 1947, really, coinciding with the atomic age, right when we basically were going to kill ourselves with nukes and pollution. And that's when they brought people on board and listen, you idiots, what are you doing? So yeah, I think sometimes people will just really need to be a little bit slapped in the face, a little rude, but what are you going to do if a person is not waking up? If they're not going to listen, you have to find a way to make them listen. So I think, that's probably what you're talking about.
Also, too, kind of I guess not necessarily a follow-up to that one, but it's something that we've been kind of diving into on the show for a very long time. So I want to get your opinion on it since you've dived into so many different cases. We've been pulling at this string about this human connection to the UFO phenomenon, saying that, we've noticed just these little details, like with certain UFO cases, people notice like mask lines, like Pascagoula, for example, the female creature that was on board, the abductees I made a reference to there being like a mask line or something that looked like a mask line on one of them. Have you noticed any connection with some of these cases that it seems like there might be a double side of the phenomenon, meaning that there's this extraterrestrial aspect of it and then possibly this like human interest that they might be kind of like swooping under and almost like trying to hide under the mask of UFO phenomenon?
To some extent. And I think we have to be very careful and use discernment here. Because I don't think that ETs are, I think they're what they appear to be. Grays are grays, mantids are mantids. They're all basically humanoid, carrying genetics like we, and what the differences we see is ancestral. This is my assessment based on first-hand cases from contactees. But there's this thing called MyLabs. There's this thing called screen memories. Screen memories come largely from us. It's a bit of a two-way street, I think, because sometimes ETs will come down wearing a cowboy hat or dressed up in clown clothes or a suit to sort of reduce the fear factor, perhaps.
Like Sam the Sandown Clown, for example.
Good case, right? That one is a weird one. That's a bit of an outlier. But yeah, there's this I did a whole video on this, the alien clown connection, because this comes up with a lot of kids seeing, ET clowns, basically. So yeah, there's that. And I'm not sure I would call that a mask as much as it is a person kind of perceiving things a certain way. An owl, a deer, a cowboy, a superhero, a teddy bear. I've heard them all, these quote screen memories. So there's that. But then there's MyLabs. And this is where I think people might see something like an actual mask or what is not ET, but is a human. MyLabs stand for military abductions. And if you look into the whole government aspect of this, there is a cover-up that's demonstrably true. There's no doubt about it. But I think it goes much deeper into that. MK Ultra and the use of psychotronic technology, hypnosis, drugs, nefarious techniques to fake an ET. Now, you will use the term abduction here. An abduction to scare the pants off of a genuine contactee, usually. Those are ones who are most vulnerable to being targeted because our governments, and I hate to say this, and I don't want to be a doom and gloomer, but I don't trust them. I think they're nefarious. Look at how they've treated people, outside of the UFO field in terms of radiating soldiers, sterilizing disenfranchised segments of the population, giving them venereal disease. That this is what our governments, our secret governments, are doing to people. And within the UFO field and community and contactee population, it's even worse. They're taking these people, quote, on board. It's not into a craft. It is, perhaps a reverse engineered craft, and basically torturing them to steer this fear-based narrative and portray ETs as enemies for their own nefarious reasons, which I can only begin to speculate on. I'm not happy about it. I don't trust them. They've lied from day one. The disclosure steps we're seeing right now are a dog and pony show. Not a fan. The only good thing that's coming out of it is it's bringing a lot of new people into the field. Love that. Love that it's causing senators and representatives to take the subject seriously. I like that it's being discussed officially without the skepticism and gaslighting and ridicule. But no, don't trust the government. I think they're absolutely doing nefarious things to our population. And that's what some of these horrific encounters are all about. It's not ET. They've been around forever. If they wanted to take over, we would know it by now. I mean, be real about this.
This might play into something that we've been kind of diving into a little bit lately, is this whole human mutilation case. So it seems like if you're taking into consideration that there seems to be this like human factor where they're trying to scare people into things, maybe some of these like human mutilation cases might make a little bit more sense. And I'm sure that you've probably at least seen some of the pictures and stuff and how bizarre some of these incisions and stuff seem to be. But the other thing that I wanted to throw in was like the Peruvian face peeler phenomenon that was happening a couple of years ago. And the key witness, that was the young little girl, had mentioned the fact that both of the people that were in these suits or whatever were speaking Spanish, and they sounded like one of them was speaking Spanish, but he was normally an English speaker. So it kind of throws into this whole idea of, you know, if there is this positive idea of the extraterrestrials trying to lay down this information, of course there has to be this other side that's trying to throw out the negative information. So kind of connecting it all in, the human mutilation phenomenon, do you think that it plays in with this human aspect, or do you think it's a totally different part of the phenomenon?
I think it's nefarious government agents, secret government cabal, call them what you want. But I think that's exactly what's going on there. It's not ET. It's part of this false flag that everyone's talking about, and I'm very worried about it, actually. The face peelers, come on, you know, that one just made me groan. I'm like, here we go again. How naive do you think people are going to be, you know, to believe that this would be ET? No. I cannot say this strongly enough. This is why I think we have to be very careful, because there are disinformants in this field. There are people who call themselves researchers. They're not researchers. They're agents. Look at Phil Klass and Donald Menzel and some of these early ones who have passed on. I'll name those names. But I think there's some people who are prominent in today's field of research who I don't trust. I wouldn't go near them. One tried to contact me. I will not talk to him or her. I'll stick in her just to keep it completely anonymous. But and so-called experiencers too, who are just putting forth these horrific accounts. I'm like, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the whole mutilation phenomena, and I looked into it because I wrote UFOs over Colorado and UFOs over New Mexico, the two hardest hit states in terms of cattle mutilations. And boy, was I surprised, because we all think ETs are doing it. No, not so fast. Gabe Valdez, the really first go-to guy to really, really dig deep for his entire career, said it's government. It's government doing this. That's what Larry Fawcett said. I interviewed Christopher O'Brien, and I'm like, okay, I hope he's figured this out, because this is what I think is going on. That's what he said. So, I know there are some researchers out there like, well, there's UFOs present during these. I'm like, well, yeah, there are. We've got UFOs. 80%, from what I understand. Talk to Michael Schratt. Love this guy. He's an amazing researcher who's really dug deep into the reverse engineering aspect of all this, crash retrievals, and have we gotten this technology? Yes, we have. Right? I was told very early on that 20% of what people see is our own. That number keeps going up. So I am very concerned that we absolutely do have this technology and be able to fool anyone, particularly with, have you seen how advanced holograms have gotten?
Oh, yeah, where you can make projections in the sky now?
You would never know. You could put one real honest-to-God reverse engineered craft and 100 holograms and have one of these real crafts start shooting laser cannons at everybody and destroy a city. ETs are invading. That's what they're going to do. I'm betcha. That's what I think is coming up. I'm really worried about it. And people are going to be running like War of the Worlds. And it's not ET. It was never ET. It is... You know who it is? If you track who's behind the cover of, because that's not my area of expertise. I like the contactees. That's where I'm going. Contactees have been told this by the ETs. It is our intelligence agencies, the 3-letter agencies. It is the highest levels of the military, particularly the Navy, but really all of them. It is the military-industrial complex. Look at the pharmaceutical industry, the energy industry, the banking industry, and the insurance industry. They're on my naughty list. They know who they are. Shame on them for being on the wrong side of history. I cannot wait till karma comes and gives them a hard blow. Karma, ETs have talked about karma, by the way. They've used that word. I'm like, oh, kind of always thought of that as a human concept. I don't know why, but no, I think that they're going to regret one day what they're doing and have done. I don't trust them. Their history on this subject is heinous. I don't believe them. I'm getting passionate about this. Sorry. I don't believe a word they say because they were asked about Roswell. Did you see that in the congressional hearings? Roswell what? What about the Malmstrom incident? We've got no good reporting on that. Malmstrom, 1967 March, UFOs shut down the missiles in Montana. Remember that one? Or the Capitol flyover. Won't admit to that. Won't admit to the Eisenhower meeting in 1954. Until and unless they're willing to come clean with at least that, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Go to your room because you are misbehaving.
No, I think that's a really funny point. Everybody's the skeptics, I'll say, of UFOs and aliens, of things of that nature. The joke is always, oh, well, I'm not going to believe it till the UFO lands on the White House lawn. Well, that basically happened in 1952.
Exactly, right?
But kind of piggybacking off of that, I tend to agree with you that I think a lot of the quote unquote UFO sightings and encounters that we see nowadays are, some sort of government or human agenda. But going back to the cattle mutilations, why do you think the government is doing these mutilations? Do you think it's just to spread fear? Do you think they're doing some sort of experimentation? What would be, these nefarious government agencies' motivations for, doing these mutilations?
Yeah, yes and yes. It kills two birds with one stone. Honestly, I think that's exactly what they're doing. It's a fear campaign, and it's very effective. And let's face it, genetics. I was thinking of becoming a geneticist when I found out how interesting it is and how little we know about it and how quickly that field is expanding. It is so interesting. The things we're doing with genetics, we're not seeing half of the stuff that's getting invented and researched, not even. So I think that's exactly what they're doing. All kinds of research into genetics, and just going back a little bit in terms of how many are us and how many are ETs. Remember the New Jersey wave that was last year of all the drones, us, no doubt in my mind. There wasn't a single person claiming to have been taken on board or seeing the ETs. And I know some people who are well connected with the aerospace industry and the military industrial complex. And they're like, not ET. From what I understand, I first heard this from Dolly Safran, and I've heard it now from 4, 5, 6, 10 contactees. ETs are not here right now. The magnetic fields, our gravitational magnetic fields are collapsing. Look at the science of this. It's harrowing. They're down 40%. ETs are not here right now. What we're seeing is almost exclusively government. I think that there's ET does still communicate with contactees. People are still in contact, no doubt in my mind. They might even actually see an ET, but it's more of a, how would I put it, remote viewing, astral projection type experience, as opposed to the ETs coming down and landing and putting little land traces on their lawn and taking them on board and implanting them and getting their baby and so forth. So that's something to keep in mind. In fact, I interviewed this guy from Europe. God bless him, he just passed. He said, you need to tell people who are doing CE5s that they're probably going to call in government folks who are going to do hideous experiments on them. He says, this is what the ETs told me, that our governments are using psychotronic technology, and doing terrible things to the human population. And I've heard that from other content. I just had to stick that in there because I think it's an important point that we need to consider.
Are you familiar with Katie Page by chance from Rocky Mountain Ranch Research?
Sure am. Yep, just put out a book, Snippy the Horse.
I was talking to her about, I think it was last week actually, and she familiarized me with something that she's found going across MK Ultra documents called freaking magic. And it's something that Orin and I always joked about, that we think that they developed something that's stronger than LSD, for example, but way stronger but shorter term effect. So, I mean, just off of that, there's government documentation of them using something called freaking magic. So going into now, if that documentation was back in like the 60s or 70s, like who knows what they're capable of possibly having now to even just entrance people into thinking that they're having a full-blown experience. Because, you know, add another 60 years of research on top of that, I guarantee you they're off in a whole other realm now where we see all this stuff with vibration and frequency, and we keep seeing these like underlying news stories about them supposedly using this stuff. I mean, they might even be at a point now where, you know, we see it all the time with the UFO phenomenon about the different lights and different auras like causing different effects on people. You know, I'm almost in the belief now that I think the U.S. government is fully capable of knowing how to use the same type of technology that people have reported from UFO experiences, where they're having these psychotropic experiences without actually taking a drug. It's rather being caused by pushing different like vibration or frequency or different like effects onto them, and in turn like disrupting like their, I guess, visuals and even ability to be able to comprehend what's happening in front of them.
I'm worried about it. You know, if you look into the history of mind control, it's very scary. Look at Havana syndrome. How the heck were they doing that? Yeah, we know that they fed hallucinogenics to people without their knowledge. How rude. And that's unbelievably. So yeah, I think that there's something going on along those lines.
I mean, they just had the thing recently where, you know, all this, aside from politics and everything, the stuff that's going on in Venezuela, when they went down and they actually got Maduro, they had all these like side little cases coming out of the people that were there saying that they were using these weapons, that they basically just dropped it and all of a sudden everybody was bleeding out of their ears and they were throwing up violently. So it's like you see all these like little hinkerings that the U.S. government has this technology, but it doesn't get pushed into the forefront. It's just this trickled release of the technology that they're capable of. Like we covered it semi-recently on the show that it got pushed over just through news stories that a bunch of these celebrities now have cloned dogs. Like they're just normalizing all of this stuff without people even realizing it. It's flying under the radar, but people are picking it up subconsciously.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it. There was a guy I worked with who was in the military. He's like, oh yeah, I got to go in a tank. And he says, he kind of lowered his voice. He says, you wouldn't believe the technology they have in these tanks. You know, I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm like, oh my God, because I talked to another guy. He said, you know, we had flat TV screens back in the 50s. You know, when did they come out? You know, a lot later than that. Yeah. From what I understand, the technology we see is 50 to 100 years behind what's actually out there. Remember, Barry Goldwater tried to get into the, quote, blue room, couldn't get in, didn't have access. Presidents apparently don't have access. We have technology that is straight out of Star Trek. It's full on, like Arthur C. Clarke, looks like magic. You know, anything sufficiently advanced technologically would look like magic. I think he said something like that.
I mean, that just makes you wonder if you're seeing these drones now that they can portray these images in the sky, and that's like general population use. Like, you know, we're making theories based on the stuff that we're actually seeing, but it's like, what is it actually? What are they actually capable of? Like, they might even be beyond the point of even using drones. Like, the reason why those might be being used by the public now for light displays is because that's way old technology for them at this point.
Yeah, and even those kind of freak me out because you can absolutely simulate a UFO with your couple of typical little drones, you know? They make that low humming sound. That's why I think you guys should talk to Michael Schratt if you get a chance. I can put you in touch with him. He's doing such amazing research, and he's really the only guy who's really is into it. As you know, I don't know of anyone else. Remember what was his name? Leonard Stringfield. He was a crash retrieval guy. Thank God for Leonard Stringfield. his status reports. Man, oh man, we absolutely have this technology. There's not a doubt in my mind. I've talked to a couple of whistleblowers myself. One guy was on his deathbed. Boy, I'm like, oh, my heart. He wanted to do his part for disclosure and had a terminal disease. He's like, I need to talk to somebody. And he found me and told me that he went to Edwards Air Force Base as a subcontractor and was walking across the tarmac or wherever and next to a, what do you call it, a hangar. And the window was open, a huge window, and saw a UFO. And it was thrumming. And he's like, what's that? He turned to his employer like, what's that? His employer turned white as a sheet and said, wouldn't even talk. So, and finally he got him alone. He's like, what was that? He's like, I can't talk about it. You shouldn't have seen that. Never bring that up to me again. And got really angry. 2 years go by, and that same employer calls him like, I need you for a job. You're the only one. Please, it's an emergency. And the guy I interviewed on his deathbed said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it unless you tell me what we saw. So they got into this whole argument, and he ended up taking him to a restaurant and having a couple of beers. And he's like, fine, I'll tell you. If you ever tell this, I could lose my job. I could be fined. This is big trouble for you. Never talk about this. And he said, what you saw was not a UFO. It was reverse engineered ET technology based on the concept of, if I get this right, counter-rotating magnets creating a magnetic field outside of the craft which propels it in the desired direction. That's in a nutshell, but yeah, we have this technology. I don't doubt it.
All right, guys, this is our last break, so hold on tight.
And now back to the show. So, Preston, kind of a more lighthearted question as we kind of wrap up here.
Oh, thank God.
Being that you've appeared on Ancient Aliens before, I know a lot of people in the UFO and paranormal community and whatnot kind of want to poo-poo Ancient Aliens, say, oh, they're, promoting an agenda, which to a certain extent everybody is. But, I've always been under the impression that if for nothing else, I think that show is great because it gets people at least interested in these subjects and asking questions and doing their own research. But would you mind kind of giving us a little bit of your experience on Ancient Aliens? It's not often we get to talk to a real live TV star on the show.
Oh, shucks. No. Yeah, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be on TV a number of times. And I learned a lesson very early on to be careful how you talk, because often I've been edited to say almost the exactly opposite of what I'm saying. I'll never forget being on the news once, and I took them to a landing site, and they pointed to the gopher holes. I'm like, oh, are those gopher holes the landing traces? Like, no, those are gopher holes. And I said, would you mind putting your hand in there and pointing to it and saying it's a landing trace? I'm like, what? No, I'm not doing that. I said, well, just put your hand in there. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that either. They were going to, I was on another show, which did a really good job, but they asked me this question: how many people in California, how many encounters are there per year in California? I'm like, there's thousands. Mm-hmm. Then they asked me, how many people are taken per day? I'm like, well, probably a couple, maybe 10 or 20. They took the question, how many people are have an encounter per day, and put the answer in, oh, there's thousands and thousands. They edited me. Mm-hmm. I was mad. I know people in this field who will not go on TV. Mm-hmm. And so I've done a number of these shows, and I've learned to be very careful. Once they handed me a script, here is the questions, and here are your answers. I'm like, what?
Then why bother having me on the show, right?
What? So Ancient Aliens has called me a number of times, and it never went through, and finally it did. They sent me over a list of 50 questions or so, and some I didn't know much about, and most I did, because, I love this field, and I really try to cover all aspects of it. And so I did my homework, and I looked up all these questions, and they didn't, you can say what you want, just, try to be as honest as possible. And I got all dressed up, and they were very nice to me. They paid for travel expenses, put me up in a really nice hotel. I spent a full day there, flew there, spent the day there, did shooting, spent another night. So it was 1, 2, 3 nights, I guess. Paid me pretty well, you know. Sometimes I was on a TV show. You know what they gave me? Peanuts. Literally peanuts. I got a jug, you know, can of water and some peanuts. They paid me peanuts. I was mad. I told them, listen, you could at least pay for my, you know, travel expenses. Like, oh, we didn't? No, you didn't. Don't pretend you didn't know that. And they did. They ended up paying for my gas. But yeah, Ancient Aliens, they paid me a couple $100 or something, which was real nice. Because they're, you know, it takes time out of your day. And ended up interviewing me for a couple of hours in a very nice place. I got to meet Richard Dolan and, you know, a couple of other guys who I'd already met before. Actually, I met Richard Dolan earlier at a convention, but it was fun. And they ended up using maybe 3 minutes of a case that I really don't endorse. And I kind of told them that when they're like, well, would you talk about this case? And I'm like, well, you know, I don't really endorse it. I'll tell you what, you know, people are saying happened. I don't believe, and I kind of couched it all in those terms. They used that. That's what the one they used. So I'm not knocking them at all. You know, it's a good show. I think that it's gone on for a very long time, and it's not really Ancient Aliens anymore, is it? It's modern. It's everything. They're covering the whole entire field. But yeah, they treated me very well, and I think they do a pretty good job.
At this point, they should just change the name of the show to Here's an Idea, Aliens. Because that's kind of just generally fits the topic of where the show has gone at this point. But I'm glad that...
Ancient Alien Theorists Believe. That's what they should call it. It says it in every show.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. When I was reading through your bio, I knew I had to ask you that question before we let you go. So
yeah, I was thrilled. I'm like, wow, they finally called me. Maybe this time it'll go through. And it did. I'm like, well,
that's awesome.
They did after that, and it didn't go through. So 1 in 10 actually make it.
Oh, wow.
Say they have so many people on that show, and that show's been going for so long too that, you know, I'm surprised they haven't like pulled every single resource that they possibly can at this point. Like, but I'm glad that at least for that show, considering that, like Orin said, it's one of those ones that really starts getting people into the topic. I'm glad that it's at least one of those shows that, for the most part, kind of lets people say their opinion and not necessarily chop it down. Maybe they'll not necessarily do the portion that you want, but it seems like, at least for the UFO field, hopefully it's one of the more unfiltered type shows that it's not being strictly pushed into a certain narrative, which, you know, for a lot of like the, you know, specific channels, you never know what their push narrative might be. Yeah. So
I will say that after I appeared on that show, I had a contactee call me. I was about, you know, I had interviewed him, had his chapter ready, sent it to him. He approved it. He's like, I'm pulling my chapter out of my book. I'm like, why? He's like, I don't like Ancient Aliens. I'm like, what? So we're still friends. You know, I love him to death. And I'm hoping that I'll get to use that chapter at some point. But yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. They are in the business of making money, but they did not chop up my words like some shows have. I know a guy who went on the History Channel. A couple of people. I know some very prominent people within this field who will never go on TV because their experience has been that bad. So I'm careful, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm grateful for it because it really does get the word out. And that show is so popular, so successful. It absolutely has woken a lot of people up.
Well, I guess starting to wrap up towards the end, obviously, like you mentioned, you've written over 32 books and you've written over 100 articles. So if anybody by chance wanted to be able to come and pick up one of your many different books or be able to check out your articles or maybe even get in contact with you if they had an experience and they might need somebody to talk to it about or even share the experience, where can people come and find you on the internet? Where can they find your books and where can they keep up with all of your research?
Yeah, if you go on the internet, you can find me. Pretty darn easy. I'm on Facebook, easy to find. Okay, let me see. Instagram, Reddit, X, Facebook. My books are on Amazon. I have a website, prestondennett.weebly.com. I do a weekly podcast with Dolly Safran, my favorite contactee, called The Light Gate on Monday evenings, 8 to 10 Eastern. got my YouTube channel, which I'm really excited about because that's doing pretty well. And always happy to hear from people. You can contact me through my website or on Messenger, Facebook, or really any of these platforms. And I think this is a very important subject. I think it really is something we all deserve to know the truth about. We've got to end this cover-up. We've got to move past the fear and lies and straight up delusion that is choking this field. So I really appreciate the opportunity, you guys, for having me on the show.
Well, Preston, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you and pick your brain, and it's been a joy to kind of hear your perspective on things. Again, thank you so much for the research you're doing and for carving out a little bit of your time to talk to us two nobodies about all of your experiences and your research.
We all play a role. I think we all play an equally important role. I really do. So thank you.
So we'll have to come back for a round 2 at some point. I know at one point I had Dolly on Inquiries of Our Reality, so maybe at some point we can get her on and be able to talk about some of her experiences firsthand too.
I will ask her. I won't promise anything, but yeah, she's been very gracious in doing a lot of interviews, which I hope she would, to help publicize the book. I think her story is one of the most important out there. It's easily the most extensive, well-verified story that I've been able to find or even read about, honestly. I'll ask her. I hope she says yes.
Oh, yeah. And we'll keep the listeners all posted on that, of course. And as Orin mentioned, of course, I appreciate you making the time to come on today. Always fascinating getting to have these conversations with you. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to see where your research goes.
I appreciate it. Yep, I've got another book coming out, sequel to Symmetry. So, yeah, I'm keeping busy. Thank you.
And
awesome.
I guess just as one last question, too, for the sake of, since you mentioned the book at the tail end, do you by chance know when people might be able to look for that book?
This year, I was aiming for last year, but if I don't get it out this year, I am leaving the field because I got to do it. No, I say that facetiously. I'm guessing no later than May. I would like it to be much earlier than that.
Well, perfect. Hopefully by then, I'm assuming Dolly might be involved, and maybe we can have that conversation and end up talking about that book on the show, too. So even better.
Very cool.
If you guys are interested in supporting the show and all the hard work behind it, don't forget to do what, Shayn?
First and foremost, don't forget to go and check out our awesome Patreon. Recently made it a little bit easier for you guys, where it is now just one tier for $2.50 a month. So if anybody wants to see what that's all about, there's a 7-day free trial, and hopefully you guys will stick around after that.
And you guys can also check out the Bizarre Reality Media merch store with t-shirts starting at the absurdly low and strangely, oddly, bizarrely, if you will, specific price of just $15.68 plus shipping.
I feel like I should change that to $16.66 just to mess with people. I'm going to change it every week. I'm just going to change it by 1 penny just to throw off when you're trying to go through this. Just special
times
for
are
you.
tough, man.
Times are tough out there. And I know that times are tough out there. But if you guys are interested in supporting the show in some other ways, one of the best ways that you guys can do that is by leaving a review or rating for the show anywhere that you guys happen to listen to podcasts. And as we usually say on the show, what's the rule, Orin?
1 and 5 stars only.
And with that, of course, 5-star, you will get a shout out on the show. And of course, we will read it on the show and talk about how much we love you. And if you give us a 1-star review, we'll still love you, but we're going to ridicule on the show because that's part of the fun of it. So expect to be shit talked if you give us a 1-star, but we love you all the same.
And you guys can also share the show with your friends and family, or, even your enemies if you want to. If you just really want to ruin their day, that's an option as well.
Grassroots support from listeners like you guys is the only way that podcasts like this grow. And if you guys are interested in keeping up with the show, how can they do that, Orin?
You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook and just do all the internet things. Y'all know how the internet works.
And of course, you guys can catch live shows and video content on the Bizarre Reality Media TikTok, YouTube, and Rumble channels.
And also be sure to show some love to our friends and sponsors of the show. We got our buddies Rick and Hans with I Know Squatch for all your squatchy gear needs. We got our buddy Dave, a.k.a. the Snarly Yow, with Snarly Yow Natural Products. and our buddy Joe with cryptoteology for all your wearable
Cryptids. And if you guys got some additional time, don't forget to go and check out our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices and Sticker Mule, with some additional discounts and credits available for you guys. And more information on that, of course, is available down in those show notes.
And as always, all the shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
And just like I have to remind you guys every single week, and I will continue reminding you every single week until the end of this show goes, always, always remain and stay bizarre. Bizarre. Bizarre.
Aliens are showing up at schools.
What about the PTA?